Nobody in that trauma bay was watching the nurse when she walked in. They were all watching the dog. Ranger had not moved from his handler's chest in 41 minutes. He had stopped a kill order, cleared an entire trauma team, and refused every command from every person in that building. Then the door opened. A new nurse walked in, quiet, unremarkable. She didn't look at the dog. She walked to the supply cart and began checking inventory like she had somewhere specific to be. Ranger's growling stopped. He stepped off his handler's chest, walked across the trauma bay, and sat down at her feet. The room went silent. She looked down at him, reached out her left hand, and when her sleeve fell back, the surgeon saw the scar. He didn't know what it meant yet, but Ranger did. What happens next will change everything they thought they knew about the quiet nurse who never pushed back. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Harlow Veterans Medical Center didn't look like a place where extraordinary things happened. It looked like every other mid-sized hospital in Houston. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly worse than they felt. A lobby that smelled of floor cleaner and recycled air, and the particular exhaustion of a building that never fully closed. The trauma wing on the second floor ran 24 hours on controlled urgency and understaffing, and the quiet professionalism of people who had learned to do difficult things without making them look difficult. Sarah Brennan had been there for 4 months. She had transferred from a position at Fort Sam Houston's Military Medical Center in San Antonio, which she had held for 2 years after leaving a previous position that her personnel file described only as Federal Contractor, Medical Division, classified posting, and which nobody at Harlow had thought to ask about further. She was 36 years old, dark hair, usually pulled back without ceremony, the kind of face that was easy to look at and hard to remember, not because it was plain, but because it gave very little away. She moved through the ward with an economy that read, to most people, as the careful movement of someone who was still learning the layout. It wasn't that. She had learned the layout on her second day. She moved carefully because she had spent a long time in environments where moving carelessly had consequences, and the habit had never left her. Dr. Richard Hale had decided on her first week that she was adequate, not exceptional, not promising. The word he used internally and occasionally out loud when he was describing the nursing staff to the residents he was training, as though the people who kept his patients alive between his visits were a supporting cast in a production centered entirely on him. He had not learned her name correctly until her 3rd month. He still occasionally called her Sandra. She had stopped correcting him. The charge nurse at Harlow's trauma wing was a broad-shouldered man named Dale Cooper, 17 years in the department, with the particular competence of someone who had outlasted 4 chiefs of surgery and intended to outlast several more. Dale ran the floor the way experienced charge nurses ran floors, by knowing everything, saying only what was necessary, and maintaining the kind of calm that was less an absence of stress and more a decision made daily to not be defeated by it. He was the one who took the call at 9:06 that Tuesday evening. Sarah was at the medication cart when she heard his voice change. Not dramatically. Dale Cooper did not do dramatic. But there was a register shift, 2 notes lower, the tone of a man receiving information that did not fit any clean category. She kept her hands moving, checked the next item on the tray, listened. "Inbound medevac," Dale called out, setting down the receiver. His eyes moved across the floor, doing the rapid inventory of available staff, with the efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times. "Critical patient, naval special warfare. Gunshot wounds, right leg and left shoulder. Handler is VSA. They are advising we have a military working dog on board. Unrestrained. They cannot get near the patient because of the animal. the trauma bay went quiet, not the focused quiet of preparation, the uncertain quiet of people waiting to see who would speak first. "Shoot the dog," Dr. Hale said. He was reviewing a chart at the nurse's station and did not look up when he said it. Nobody laughed, because nobody was sure he was joking. "We cannot sedate it," Dale said. "They tried on the bird. Animal won't allow approach." Hale set down the chart. "Then restrain it. Call security. Call animal control if you have to. Get it off my patient." Dale looked at the assembled staff, the particular look of a man running out of options in real time. "Who's handling Bay 1? Silence." Sarah set down the medication tray. "Read it in under a minute." The way she read everything, completely and without wasting time on the parts that didn't matter. "Captain Derek Cole, United States Navy, SEAL, 37 years old." She looked at the dog's designation in the transport notes. "Ranger, Belgian Malinois, military working dog, Naval Special Warfare Group. Handler status, VSA." She set the file down. "I'll take Bay 1, she said. Dale looked at her. "Sarah, this animal has already taken a piece out of the flight medic's sleeve and cornered 2 members of the SEAL team in the rear of the aircraft. He is not a family pet. He has 80 pounds of military training, and right now he is the only thing standing between that patient and treatment." Sarah picked up her kit. "Has anyone been hurt?" she asked. "Not yet," Dale said. "Then we're fine," she said. She walked toward the bay doors. Dr. Hale looked up from his chart for the first time. He still didn't use her name. "You are not cleared for trauma activation. Stand down and let the qualified personnel handle this." Sarah stopped walking. She turned around. She looked at Hale with the particular patience of someone who had stopped explaining themselves to people who had already decided not to listen. "Is there a qualified person in this room who can handle that dog?" she asked. The room was quiet. She turned back around and walked through the bay doors. The medevac touched down on the rooftop pad at 9:22. Sarah heard it before she saw it. The particular percussion of rotor blades changing pitch as the aircraft descended, a sound she had not heard in 4 years, that her nervous system recognized before her brain did. She was already at the trauma bay doors when the ground team came through them. The gurney came in fast. Captain Derek Cole was on his back, plate carrier stripped, tactical pants cut to the hip. A tourniquet was cinched above his right knee, the limb below it, the color of something that had been denied blood for too long. His left shoulder was packed with gauze that had gone dark. An oxygen mask covered the lower half of his face. His eyes were closed. On his chest stood Ranger. The dog was exactly as the transport notes had described, and entirely different from what the description prepared you for. He was lean and black and tan, with the scar running from his left ear to his jaw, and he stood on Cole's chest the way a soldier stands on contested ground. Not aggressive, not frantic, certain. The absolute certainty of an animal that had made a decision and was not interested in reconsidering it. The ground team stopped 6 feet from the bay entrance. The flight medic, a young petty officer named Harris, with blood on his flight suit and the look of a man who had been managing an impossible situation for 40 minutes, jogged alongside the gurney. "Every time we reach past him, he goes for the hand," Harris said. "We got the tourniquet on because Chief Williams distracted him for 30 seconds. That's the only treatment he has received since the incident. He needs the shoulder packed properly and a surgical airway assessment in the next 10 minutes, or we lose him." "Get the dog off the gurney," Hale said, from behind Sarah. He had followed her to the bay, which she suspected was less about helping and more about ensuring nobody forgot he was in charge. "Sir," Harris said carefully, "that dog will take your arm off at the elbow. Then sedate it. We tried. He won't allow approach for injection." Hale turned to the 2 security guards who had materialized at the bay entrance. Both of them were looking at Ranger with the expressions of men whose training had not included this specific scenario. One of them had his hand on his taser. "Do not use that," Sarah said. Everyone turned to look at her. "If you discharge a taser into that dog while he is standing on a patient in hemorrhagic shock, the current will conduct directly through the patient's chest." She said it the way she said most things, without emphasis, without drama, as a statement of fact that did not require anyone's agreement to be true. Hale stepped toward her. He was tall, and he used it. "Go back inside and prep the surgical airway kit. Leave this to the professionals." Sarah looked at him. Then she looked at Ranger. The dog was watching her. Not the way he had been watching the rest of the room, the scanning surveillance of an animal tracking multiple threats simultaneously. He was watching her specifically, his amber eyes focused and still, his head tilted 2 degrees to the right. He had been watching her since she walked through the bay doors. She turned her body sideways, reducing her profile. She dropped her chin. She let her hands hang completely loose at her sides. She breathed in through her nose, 4 counts, out through her mouth, 4 counts. The tactical breathing she had learned not in a nursing program, but in a place that had no official name in any database she could access anymore. She walked toward the gurney. Nobody stopped her. Not because they approved. Because they were all watching Ranger, and Ranger had gone completely still. She stopped 4 feet from the gurney. She and the dog looked at each other. Ranger's nostrils worked. Once, twice, 3 times, reading her the way his training had taught him to read everything, not with his eyes, but with the full depth of every sense available to him. She stood still and let him read. His ears came forward. His lips, which had been pulled back, showing his teeth since the moment he had loaded onto the medevac in a firebase courtyard that Sarah did not know the name of, but could picture with reasonable accuracy based on the transport notes, relaxed. He stepped off Cole's chest. He walked to the edge of the gurney. He stretched his neck toward her and pressed his nose against her left forearm. He held it there. The room was so quiet, Sarah could hear the cardiac monitor on the gurney, the rapid, shallow rhythm of a man running out of time. Then Ranger sat down, not beside Cole, at Sarah's feet. He looked up at her with his amber eyes, and he waited. Behind her, she heard Dr. Hale make a sound she had never heard from him before. Something between disbelief and the particular discomfort of a man watching something happen that his framework could not account for. "What did you do?" Harris whispered. Sarah was already moving to the gurney. She put one hand on Ranger's harness, feeling the tactical nylon beneath her fingers, the worn edges of a working kit that had been in the field a long time. "I need the trauma bay open," she said to Dale. "Full activation. Get Dr. Hale's surgical airway kit on the tray, and someone call the OR and tell them we are coming in 8 minutes. Dale stared at her for 1 second, then he turned and ran. Sarah leaned over Cole. She tilted his chin. She placed 2 fingers at his throat and counted. She pulled the saturated gauze from his shoulder with controlled hands and assessed the wound beneath it, in the way of someone who had assessed wounds in conditions considerably worse than a fully equipped trauma bay. Ranger stayed at her feet. He did not make a sound. He watched every set of hands in the room with his amber eyes, and he was still. Dr. Hale appeared at her shoulder. His voice was lower than usual. "Whatever you did with that animal, I need you to step aside now and let me take over." Sarah was repacking the shoulder wound with fresh gauze. Her hands did not slow down. "His pressure is 68/42, she said. "The tourniquet has been on for 43 minutes. The shoulder wound has subclavian involvement." She pressed the fresh gauze down hard and held it. "If we do not move him to the OR in the next 7 minutes, we are not going to have a decision to make about the dog." Hale reached across her and grabbed her wrist. Not the hand working the wound, the other one, the left one. His grip was firm and deliberate, and designed to communicate a specific message, about who held authority in this room. Ranger stood up. He did not growl. There was no warning. He was sitting, and then he was standing, and the temperature in the trauma bay dropped in the way it drops when something that has been patient decides it is finished being patient. His eyes were fixed on Hale's hand around Sarah's wrist. Hale felt it. The entire room felt it. The quality of attention from an animal that has moved from observation into something else entirely. Hale released her wrist. He stepped back. He kept his eyes on the dog and his hands very still. Sarah did not look at either of them. She finished packing the wound. She applied the pressure dressing with the flat of her palm and held the count. Her sleeve had ridden up during the struggle when Hale grabbed her. She didn't notice, but Hale did. On the inside of her left forearm, just below the crease of her elbow, was a scar. Not surgical, not accidental, deliberate and precise. A shape that meant nothing to him. A marking that belonged to a context so far outside his experience that he had no category for it. He stared at it. He had seen tattoos on nurses before. He had seen burn scars, surgical scars, the ordinary evidence of ordinary lives lived in ordinary ways. This was none of those things. He didn't know how he knew. He just knew. "Who are you?" he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Sarah pulled her sleeve down. She looked at Cole's face, at the stillness of him, the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the gray undertone in his skin that she had learned to recognize not in any classroom, but in places where the nearest surgical facility was an hour away by helicopter, on a good day. She looked at Dale. "Tell the OR we are coming now," she said. "Not in 7 minutes. Now." She looked at Hale. "Are you going to help me or not?" she said. Hale looked at the scar hidden again beneath her sleeve. He looked at Ranger, sitting at her feet like an 80-pound endorsement. He snapped on his gloves. "Let's move," he said. "Still with us? Drop a comment right now and tell us. Did you see that coming? Keep watching. It gets deeper from here." The OR at Harlow Veterans Medical Center was on the 3rd floor. Sarah took the stairs. Not because the elevator was slow, because Ranger would not get in the elevator. He stood at the sliding doors, assessed the interior with his amber eyes, and planted his feet with the quiet finality of an animal that had run its own calculation and arrived at its own conclusion. Sarah looked at the stairwell door. Ranger looked at her. She pushed it open, and he went through without hesitation. They went up together, her footsteps and his paws on the concrete steps, the fluorescent lighting cold and indifferent above them. The OR team had taken the elevator with Cole, the gurney moving fast through the corridor below, while Sarah and the dog climbed in parallel, arriving at the 3rd floor door. At the same moment the OR team pushed through the double doors at the end of the hall. She watched through the observation window as they transferred Cole to the table. Ranger sat beside her and watched too. His breathing had slowed from the shallow, rapid pace of the trauma bay to something longer and more deliberate. He pressed his nose against the glass once, leaving a small fog print, then lifted his head and continued watching the man on the table with the focused patience of an animal that had decided its job was not finished. "You should not have that dog up here." Sarah turned. Dale Cooper was standing in the corridor behind her. He had taken the stairs too, apparently, and he had done it quietly enough that neither she nor Ranger had heard him arrive. He was holding 2 cups of vending machine coffee. He held one out to her. She took it. He did not leave. He stood beside her at the observation window and looked through the glass at the OR team working around Cole. The attending surgeon, Dr. Patricia Webb, was already at the table, gloved and focused. Her movements the practiced geometry of someone who thought in millimeters, and had been doing so for 20 years. "How did you do that?" Dale said. "With the dog." Sarah drank the coffee. It tasted like burnt cardboard, and she drank it anyway, because she had learned a long time ago not to be particular about coffee when it was available. He recognized me, she said. Dale looked at her sideways. Dogs don't recognize people they've never met. Sarah said nothing. Dale was quiet for a moment. He was the kind of man who processed things thoroughly before speaking, which was one of the reasons he had lasted 17 years in a department that burned through people. He looked at Ranger. He looked at Sarah's left forearm where the sleeve covered the scar. Your transfer paperwork from Fort Sam, he said carefully. The prior posting it listed. Federal contractor, medical division, classified posting. He paused. I have processed a lot of transfer paperwork in 17 years. I have never seen that specific language before. Sarah watched the OR through the glass. Patricia Webb had opened Cole's shoulder. The suction was running. The canister on the floor was filling darker and faster than anyone wanted. He is going to make it, Sarah said. Webb is the best vascular surgeon in this building. She found the bleed, watched the monitor. Dale watched the monitor. The numbers were bad, but moving. Fractionally, stubbornly, in the right direction. He let the transfer paperwork go, for now. The man who arrived on the second floor 40 minutes later was not wearing a hospital badge. He was in his mid-40s, dark jacket, open collar, no tie. Gray at the temples, cut short in a way that was not quite civilian and not quite military, and suggested he had been one and become the other, and not entirely resolved the transition. He walked through the corridor with the efficiency of someone who had already mapped the building before entering it. Dale saw him first. He came to find Sarah at the OR observation window. There is a man downstairs, Dale said quietly. He did not check in at the front desk. He went directly to the trauma bay and stood at the door for approximately 90 seconds, looking at the space where Cole's gurney had been. He is currently at the nurse's station, asking questions that a visitor does not usually ask. What kind of questions? Sarah said. About the patient? About the nurse who handled the dog? About whether there is recorded footage from the trauma bay? Sarah looked at Ranger. The dog was already looking at the corridor. His ears were fully forward. His weight had shifted onto his front paws. He was tracking something at a frequency the human ear could not yet reach. He knows someone is coming, Dale said. He knew before either of us, Sarah said. She handed Dale her coffee cup. She rolled up her left sleeve. She looked at the scar for a moment, the deliberate mark on the inside of her forearm, faded at the edges from years of sun and field work, and a life lived in places that did not appear on official records. Then she rolled her sleeve back down. Tell me about Ranger's transport paperwork, she said to Dale. The dog's unit designation. What did it say? Dale pulled out his phone. He had photographed everything on intake, the habit of a man who had learned that details mattered after the fact. He found the transport manifest and read it. Naval Special Warfare Group 2, he said. Military Working Dog Program. Handler Captain Derek Cole. Dog designation Ranger. He scrolled. Prior posting. He stopped. What? Sarah said. Dale looked up. Joint Special Operations Command. Classified Training Program. Lackland Air Force Base, 2017 to 2019. Sarah looked at Ranger. The dog looked back at her with his amber eyes and his scarred jaw, and the patience of an animal that had been carrying the weight of a very long mission, and had not yet been told it was over. She had been at Lackland in 2017, not as a nurse, not as a contractor, as a pararescue jumper with the 24th Special Operations Wing, running personnel recovery missions in support of JSOC operations across 3 theaters simultaneously. She had been there when Ranger was a puppy. She had been the one who first put him through water obstacle training in the summer heat of a San Antonio afternoon because his assigned trainer had gone down with a broken wrist, and somebody had to do it, and she had been the closest warm body with the right clearance level. He had bitten her on the left forearm during the 3rd session. Not aggressively, playfully, the way young dogs bit things they were interested in. She had laughed. She still had the scar. Dale was looking at her. "You were there," he said. It was not a question. Sarah watched the OR monitor through the glass. Cole's pressure was climbing. Slowly, but climbing. "I was a lot of places," she said. "Most of them aren't on my transfer paperwork." Dale absorbed that. He looked at the man now visible at the end of the corridor, approaching the OR observation area with the direct, purposeful walk of someone who had identified a destination. "Who is he?" Dale said. "I don't know yet," Sarah said, "but Ranger does." The dog had risen to his feet. He was not in threat posture. He was in the posture she had learned to read as recognition, the specific recalibration of an animal, filing someone under known quantity rather than unknown threat. The man stopped 10 feet away. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the dog. He looked at the scar on her forearm that her rolled sleeve had left visible. He said one word. "Brennan." Not a question. A confirmation. The tone of a man who had been looking for something and had just found it exactly where his calculations said it would be. Sarah looked at him. "Agent Warren," she said. He almost smiled. It had been a long time. "How long have you known Cole was here?" he said. "Since his name came across the intake board," she said. 47 minutes ago. And you did not call it in." She looked at the OR window, at the monitor showing Cole's pressure continuing its slow climb towards something sustainable. "I was busy," she said. Warren moved to stand beside her at the window. He looked through the glass at the OR team working in their careful practiced silence. "There is a problem," he said. "There usually is," Sarah said. He looked at her. Cole was not in the field on an authorized operation. His unit was officially on stand-down. Whatever he was doing in that firebase courtyard tonight was not on any tasking order that exists in any system I have access to. Sarah said nothing. "Which means," Warren continued, "that whatever he found out there, whatever reason someone put 2 rounds in him and loaded him on an Osprey, it is bigger than a mission gone wrong." She looked at Ranger. The dog was listening. She was certain of it. "What was he carrying?" she said. Warren reached into his jacket and produced a small evidence bag. Inside it was a memory card, military grade, the kind used in field recording equipment. "We found it in the dog's harness," Warren said, "side pocket, sewn into the lining. Someone put it there deliberately, and someone went to considerable trouble to make sure it was not found on intake." Sarah looked at the evidence bag. "Cole put it there," she said. "Or someone put it there for him," Warren said. "Either way, we do not have equipment here to read it. And I have 2 people downstairs right now who are not federal agents and are not hospital staff, and have been asking the front desk about the patient in the OR with a specificity that tells me they already know what is on it." Sarah looked down the corridor. Ranger growled, once, low and certain. The sound of a dog who had just confirmed something. "They are already on this floor," she said. Warren turned. At the far end of the corridor, the elevator doors had opened. 2 people stepped out of the elevator. A man and a woman, both in civilian clothes. Both wearing the green laminated visitor badges that Harlow issued at the front desk to people who had signed in under names that may or may not have been their own. The man was heavyset, late 50s, the soft build of someone who had once been physical and had made different choices. The woman was younger, dark blazer, leather folio pressed against her chest like something she was not planning to put down. They walked directly toward the OR observation area. Not toward the nurses' station, not toward the information board. Directly toward the OR, with the confidence of people who had been told exactly where to go and by whom. Ranger stood up. His ears came fully forward. His amber eyes locked on to the heavy-set man, with the particular focus that Sarah had learned in 2 years of working alongside military dogs meant one specific thing. "He knows him," Warren said quietly. "He remembered him," Sarah said. "There is a difference." Warren looked at her. "The man ran a training program at Lackland 8 years ago," she said. "Classified. Ranger was in the first intake." She paused. "Whatever that man did in that program, the dog has not forgotten it." Warren put himself between the two approaching visitors and the OR door. He held up his credentials, the leather fold, not announcing himself with it, but making it visible. "This is a restricted surgical floor," he said. His voice was pleasant and entirely immovable. "Visitor access does not extend above the second floor." The heavy-set man stopped. His eyes moved from Warren to Sarah to Ranger, and then back to Sarah. They stopped on her left forearm, where the sleeve had ridden up again, and the scar was visible. He looked at it for 2 full seconds. Something shifted in his face. Not fear. Recalculation. The expression of a man who had arrived expecting one situation and found a different one already in progress. "We are here for the patient's personal effects," the woman said. Her voice was flat and practiced, standard language delivered with the cadence of someone who had used it before. "His commanding officer authorized retrieval." "His commanding officer," Warren said, "is currently unreachable, and has not authorized anything through any channel I have access to in the last 3 hours." The woman looked at her folio. The heavy-set man looked at Sarah. "You should not be here," he said. Not to Warren, to her. Ranger took 1 step forward. "No," Sarah said. 1 word, quiet and absolute. But his amber eyes stayed fixed on the man's face, with an attention that made the corridor feel considerably smaller than it was. "I work here," Sarah said to the man. He looked at the scar. "You did not always," he said. "No," she said, "I didn't." He held her gaze for a moment, the calculation still running behind his eyes, revising itself against information he hadn't expected to encounter on a hospital corridor on a Tuesday night in Houston, Texas. Then he looked at the evidence bag in Warren's hand. His expression changed again, sharper this time, more urgent. "That is federal property," he said. Warren looked at the evidence bag, then at the man, then back at the bag with the expression of someone considering the statement and finding it unpersuasive. "What is on the memory card?" Warren said. The man said nothing. Warren looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Ranger. The dog was still watching the heavy-set man with his amber eyes and his scarred jaw, and the absolute focused patience of an animal that had been waiting for this specific moment since a firebase courtyard several thousand miles away. She thought about Cole on the table behind the OR glass, about the 2 rounds someone had put in him, and the Osprey, and the memory card sewn into the lining of a dog's harness by someone who understood that the only courier nobody would search thoroughly was the one with 80 pounds of military training and a kill order already signed against him. "Cole knew," she said quietly. Warren looked at her. "He knew they would search him," she said. "He put it in the harness because he knew the dog would find someone worth trusting before anyone found the card." The heavy-set man's jaw tightened. The woman with the folio took 1 step backward toward the elevator. Warren's hand moved inside his jacket. "Don't," he said, to both of them. Neither of them moved. Sarah walked to the nurse's station counter. She set down her coffee cup. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and placed a small device on the counter beside it. A body camera. The kind worn by federal personnel in situations where documentation mattered. Small enough to clip to a badge lanyard. Large enough to capture everything that had been said in this corridor in the last 4 minutes. The heavy-set man stared at it. "I have been recording since the elevator opened," Sarah said. The woman with the folio looked at the heavy-set man. The silent communication of 2 people arriving simultaneously at the same conclusion. "What is on the memory card?" Warren said again. His voice had not changed. It did not need to. The heavy-set man looked at the OR window. at Cole on the table beyond the glass, at the monitor showing his pressure climbing its slow, stubborn way back toward survival. He looked at Sarah. "You were at Lackland," he said. She said nothing. 2017, he said. PJ, 24th Special Operations Wing. You ran the water obstacle training for the first intake of the K-9 program when Briggs went down with the broken wrist. She said nothing. He looked at Ranger. The dog looked back at him with amber eyes that held something older and more certain than hostility. The program was not what it was documented as, the man said. His voice had dropped. The practiced flatness of it was gone. What was left was something more complicated. The voice of a man who had made a series of choices and was now standing at the end of them. It was a biometric collection program. Every dog handler who came through Lackland for 2 years. Fingerprints, retinal scans, psychological profiles. The data was supposed to be used for enhanced security clearance processing. He stopped. It was not used for that, Warren said. It was sold, the man said, to a private intelligence firm operating out of 3 countries that are not allied with the United States. He looked at the evidence bag. Cole found the transaction records. He documented everything. He was bringing it in. Sarah looked at Ranger. The dog had not moved. He was still watching the heavy-set man with his amber eyes. But something in his posture had shifted fractionally. The threat readiness was still there. But underneath it, something that looked in the way that things looked in animals, if you knew how to read them. Like the particular exhaustion of something that had been carrying a weight and had just been told it could set it down. "How many handlers?" Warren said. The man closed his eyes. 214, he said. Over 22 months. The corridor was very quiet. Sarah thought about the handlers, about the men and women who had come through Lackland, thinking they were being processed for security clearances, about the data sitting on a server somewhere being sold to people whose intentions toward 214 American Special Operations personnel she did not need to speculate about. She thought about Cole on the table. She thought about the dog at her feet. She thought about a San Antonio afternoon in 2017 and a 14-month-old Malinois who had bitten her on the left forearm during water obstacle training and left a mark she had carried ever since. She looked at the heavy-set man. "Who authorized the sale?" she said. He opened his eyes. He looked at Warren. Warren nodded. He produced a folded document, a single page, dense with names and dates and transaction records, that he held out to Warren with the steady hands of someone who had been carrying it for a long time, and had decided that this corridor on this Tuesday night was where he was going to put it down. Warren took it. He unfolded it. He read the first name at the top of the authorization chain. He looked at Sarah. She read it over his arm. She recognized it. So did Ranger. The dog stood up. He looked at the OR window. He looked at Sarah. His tail moved once. A single slow beat. The movement she had learned to read as confirmed. "Call it in," she said to Warren. He already had his phone out. The woman with the folio had stopped moving toward the elevator. Both of them stayed exactly where they were. Ranger sat back down at Sarah's feet. He leaned his weight against her leg, the gentle, persistent pressure of an animal that had completed the thing it set out to do and was now simply present. She put her hand on his harness. Through the OR glass, the monitor showed Cole's pressure holding steady. He was going to make it. She had known since the moment she read the transport notes. She had known since the moment Ranger sat down at her feet in the trauma bay and looked up at her with his amber eyes and waited. He had found someone worth trusting. He had been right. The OR doors opened at 12:34 in the morning. Dr. Patricia Webb came out, still in her gown, mask pulled down around her neck. She looked at Sarah, standing at the observation window with the dog at her feet, and the federal agent on her left, and 2 people in visitor badges sitting in hospital chairs at the end of the corridor, under the quiet supervision of a woman from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, who had arrived so quickly, it suggested she had already been in the building when Warren made the call. Webb looked at all of it without comment. She looked at Sarah. "He is going to walk out of here," she said. "The shoulder will need months of physical therapy. The leg is intact. He is going to walk out of here on both of them." She turned around and went back through the doors to close. Sarah exhaled. It was the first complete breath she had taken since 9:06. Ranger pressed his nose against the OR glass one more time. Then he turned and sat back down beside her, and looked up at her with his amber eyes, and waited. She looked down at him. "Good boy," she said quietly. His tail moved twice. Dr. Richard Hale found her at 1:15 in the family waiting area on the 3rd floor. She was sitting in a chair the color of old mustard, drinking vending machine coffee that was technically labeled premium roast and tasted like neither of those words. Ranger was under her chair with his chin on her left foot, genuinely asleep, his legs twitching with whatever Belgian Malinois dreamed about when they had finished their mission and been told they could rest. Hale stood in the doorway for a moment. He was still in his white coat. His credentials hung from his pocket, the armor of everything he had always been in this building. He looked at the dog asleep under the chair, and at the nurse sitting above him with her rolled-up sleeve and the scar visible on her forearm, and the empty coffee cup she was holding like she had forgotten it was there. He walked in and sat down in the chair across from her. It was the first time in 4 months that Richard Hale had sat down in the same space as Sarah Brennan without a clinical reason to be there. He was quiet for a moment. "I have been chief of trauma surgery at this hospital for 11 years, he said. His voice was different from his ward voice, smaller, more honest. "I have seen things in that trauma bay that I would not know how to explain to someone who was not there." He looked at her forearm. "I have never seen anything like tonight," he said. Sarah drank her coffee. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the posture of a man setting something down. "I called you Sandra for 3 months, he said. She said nothing. "I told the residents you were adequate," he said. She said nothing. "I grabbed your wrist," he said. She looked at him. His face had the expression of a man who had spent the last 3 hours revising something fundamental about himself, and had not yet finished, but had decided to start saying it out loud anyway. "I did not know who you were," he said. "You still don't," she said, not unkindly. She held his gaze. "But you know what I can do." She paused. That should have always been enough. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We have a trauma director position opening in the spring. It has been posted internally for 6 weeks. Nobody has applied who is qualified to do it the way it needs to be done." Sarah looked at her coffee cup. "I am a floor nurse," she said. Hale looked at Ranger asleep under her chair, at the dog who had stopped a kill order and cleared a trauma bay, and carried evidence across 12,000 miles of ocean, sewn into the lining of his harness, because someone had trusted him to find the right person. "You are a floor nurse," Hale said. "The way a person says something they now understand means something entirely different from what they thought it meant 4 months ago." Sarah almost smiled. She finished her coffee. Cole was discharged on a Friday morning 3 weeks later. He walked out on his own. Both legs. His left arm was in a sling, and he moved with the careful deliberateness of a man whose body was still negotiating the terms of its recovery. The Houston morning was clear and cold, the kind of Texas winter morning that couldn't decide if it was actually winter, and had settled for a bright, tentative compromise. Sarah was at the entrance, not in scrubs, in her own clothes, a jacket, her hair down, the scar on her forearm visible below the cuff in the morning light. Cole stopped in front of her. He was taller than he had looked on the gurney. They always were. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he looked at the scar. "Ranger did that," Cole said. His voice was still rough from the surgical airway, the way voices stayed rough for weeks after. He looked at the dog, sitting at Sarah's left side. "He bit you during water obstacle training at Lackland, and you laughed and kept going." She said nothing. "He told me about you," Cole said, "not in words, but he told me." She looked at Ranger. The dog was looking at Cole with his amber eyes and his scarred jaw and his tail moving in the slow, steady rhythm of an animal that had completed the longest mission of its life and found the outcome acceptable. Cole reached into the pocket of his jacket. He held out his hand. In his palm was a military challenge coin. Brass, worn smooth at the edges, the emblem on the face almost rubbed away from years of handling. Almost. She could still make out the image. A parachute above a pair of lightning bolts. The flash of the 24th Special Operations Wing. "I have carried that since Lackland," Cole said. "I found it on the floor of the obstacle course the day after you ran Ranger through the water training. I kept it because I thought whoever dropped it would come back for it." Sarah looked at the coin. "Nobody came back," she said. "But you showed up anyway." She took the coin. She turned it over in her fingers, ran her thumb across the worn face of it. The parachute, the lightning bolts, the mark of a unit that did not appear on official records, and did not advertise its existence, and sent people into places that were not on any map, and trusted them to find their way back. She looked at Ranger. He looked at her. His tail moved once, twice. The specific happiness of a dog who had run the mission all the way to the end, and found everyone still standing. She closed her fingers around the coin. Cole cleared his throat. "I have been told," he said carefully, "that there is a trauma director position opening at this hospital in the spring." Sarah looked at him. "Warren mentioned it," Cole said. "He said someone put your name forward." Through the glass doors she could see the trauma wing corridor, the fluorescent lights, the nurses' station, where Dale Cooper was already on his second cup of coffee and his third impossible situation of the morning. She thought about Fort Sam Houston, about Lackland, about the classified posting that her transfer paperwork described in 3 words, and which had taken 7 years of her life, and given her back something she was still in the process of identifying. She thought about a Tuesday night, and a dog that had stopped a kill order, and sat down at her feet, and looked up at her like she was the fixed point everything else oriented around. She thought about what it might mean to stop moving and stay somewhere. To be the last one in and the last one out, not because the mission required it, but because she had chosen it. She looked at the coin in her hand. Then she looked at Ranger. He was already looking at the hospital doors. She almost smiled. "To the ones who find their way back," she said quietly. Cole raised his good hand. "To the ones who never stopped looking," he said. They stood in the cold Houston morning outside Harlow Veterans Medical Center, and the city moved around them in its loud, indifferent way, and neither of them moved with it. Not yet. Ranger pressed his weight against her leg. She put her hand on his harness. And for the first time in a very long time, Sarah Brennan, who had jumped from aircraft and run into burning things and packed wounds in the dark and carried people out of places they were not supposed to survive, felt something settle in her chest that had nothing to do with adrenaline or mission completion or the particular relief of an outcome that had gone the right way. It felt like arriving. It felt like staying. It felt like home. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The most extraordinary people are often the quietest ones in the room. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story of courage, loyalty, and the kind of justice that doesn't make the evening news, but changes everything anyway. Tell me in the comments, did you see the twist coming? And what do you think Sarah wrote on that application form? Until next time, never leave anyone behind.